Hi, my name is Marina Torres. Hola, mi nombre es Marina Torres and I'm running to be LA's next city attorney. Y yo soy candidata para la ciudad de Los Ángeles para fiscal. And right now you're watching Cinemills TV.
Marina Torres, thank you for coming through today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's an honor and it's a pleasure.
It's great to be with you. And Marina, you know, you're walking away from what most people would consider a dream job, being a prosecutor for the Department of Justice, to help this city. And you're running for city attorney of Los Angeles, and we need a lot of help.
Yeah, I mean, and I will tell you, it is a dream job. I mean, it has been a dream job for the years that I've been a federal prosecutor. I was drawn to that job because I think it's one of the few jobs out there where with a law degree, your entire job is to do justice. I mean, you walk in from day to evening, and that's your entire job. It's not to accrue up convictions. It's not to do, it's not anything else but the ability and the desire and the goal to do justice. And as you alluded, our city is very much in trouble, I think. And so that was the purpose, is continuing to be a prosecutor, and just in this case, be a prosecutor for the people of LA.
Right. Now, we talk about the dream job, but tell us about the dream as a young girl, being the daughter of immigrants in, the city of Los Angeles, to Mexican parents of Mexican heritage. Tell us how you saw this dream and what it took to make it happen.
Yeah, so my family is from Michoacan and Jalisco, and both of my parents came into the United States undocumented. My mom became documented, I want to say it was during college, through the Immigration Reform and Control Act. And I still remember when she got her green card and, eventually full-on citizenship. But growing up, we were always worried about her getting deported. Even as a kid, I was in grade school when Prop 187 happened. I remember being in school and our teacher telling us, I wasn't really aware what was going on. So one day to the next, our teacher gets up in class and says, you kids, you may have heard something on the news, you may have heard something's happening. I want you to know that you're all safe here, that I'm not going to call anyone, that everyone is okay here. And that was, I don't remember how old I was, but to hear that as a kid in school, like, hey, you guys are safe. And I'm like, what? I didn't even know I was in any danger, right? But that was the environment that we all were growing up at the time, those of us that were children of parents who were undocumented. And through a lot of hard work and through a lot of luck and a lot of opportunities, I was able to, get into Berkeley for undergrad and then Stanford for law school. Was in the private sector for a bit, and then I joined President Obama's team at the Department of Homeland Security, working on DACA policy. And then finally, became a federal prosecutor for the Department of Justice.
I mean, that's just amazing. To come from that scenario and to really effectuate your dream here in America it's such an inspiring story. And, it's interesting you brought up DACA, because could you imagine how many Marina Torreses might not have that opportunity if they're deported back to their homes?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, right now, I think the number stands at about 800,000 individuals in the United States who have received protection from deportation through DACA. And especially during COVID, you got to see all the doctors and nurses and teachers and, folks working in law enforcement that, were here and had the ability to work and had the ability to stay here because of DACA. So there, I can imagine it very easily, because when I was at the Department of Homeland Security, these weren't just case files for me. All of these applications were a story. All of these applications were people that had stories very much like myself. And that was something that, everyone in the department believed. Like, this is why we're going to work every day. This is why we're pushing this program. And, honestly, hopefully, fingers crossed, someday can have a more permanent path for immigration reform for these individuals.
Yeah. Marina, it seems like the prosecutors and the world within prosecution is such a male-dominated world. As a woman, where do you draw the tough skin to put away some of the biggest monsters in society? Where'd you get that tough skin from?
Yeah, I mean, and you're absolutely right. I mean, especially as a prosecutor, I think quite often people either forget or don't think that I'm a prosecutor because I walk in and I'm all of, 5 feet tall. So I would say it's a combination of both my professional and my personal upbringing. Obviously, being the daughter of immigrants, you grow a certain kind of tough skin, and I'm also the eldest, I should say that. I'm also the eldest, and I have 2 younger brothers. My mom was a very strong woman on her own. She came over at the age of 19 with, pretty much nothing, right? And met my dad here and, built a life for us here. So I come from a line of very strong women, and my personal life really has made you a little tougher. And professionally, I think as well, right? Like a lot of these areas, you're right, like there are very few women. There are very few women who become presidential appointees. There's even fewer women in law enforcement. And so it's a growing number. And so I actually really try to do a lot of recruitment efforts for that, because I think it's so important that those of us that have made it turn right back around and make sure to pull people up behind us and be that example for other people. I never would have thought I was going to be a prosecutor until I saw other people with the same kind of beliefs that I had. And they would do panels and they would do videos, and obviously Kamala Harris, our vice president, people like that who showed me what a prosecutor could be and what they could look like, allowed me to see myself reflected in that. And so it's been a mission of mine throughout my career to continue that for other people.
Right. Marina, a lot of young women, especially young women growing up in lower socioeconomic zones, as we'll say, they tend to make decisions that haunt them for the rest of their lives. And to become a prosecutor, you almost have to be squeaky clean. What kept you away from the bad crowd, so to say? How did you steer away from those moments in time where you could have been caught up in something that would have long-term effects in your career?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was my family. First generation Latina mom. I mean, there's not a whole lot that's going to get by her. So, no, I grew up with a really tough parent in a really tough household, and being the oldest and the only daughter, I think there was that concern, especially where we grew up. I mean, kids were getting wrapped up in trouble, and so my mom was very overprotective, and I think, I hated it then, but I think in retrospect, that is probably what got me on and kept me on the straight and narrow.
That's awesome, and I hope that our younger audience that's listening can look to you as kind of inspiration, as a role model of what you can be coming out of absolutely nothing, and so that's really commendable. Now, Marina, in terms of your servitude to the city of Los Angeles by running for city attorney, tell us how you're going to tackle some of the tougher issues. And I'm going to ask you, what's really the topic around dinner tables is this homeless crisis out here. What's your solution for this, and how can your office as a city attorney effectuate a real plan to solve it?
Sure, and I'll first off start off by saying I never thought I'd run for office. I mean, I'm running for the position, and it happens to be one that I have to run for office for, but I'm really eager to be a prosecutor for the city of Los Angeles, and that's a thing. I mean, that's the way I envision the city attorney of Los Angeles being. I mean, it's the prosecutor that's closest to the people. I love what I do. I never thought I'd be a prosecutor, and yet, here I am, and I love the job, because you get to fight for what's right? And you get to stand up for people that can't stand up for themselves. And that's something that I see there's very much a need in the city of Los Angeles for, and especially I think at the head of that office. So I want to be that tough prosecutor that is working and protecting Angelenos. And I think, especially in regard to the homelessness issue, I mean, it is number 1, 2, and 3 in terms of topics that everybody is talking about, because most of us, as we're going by our daily lives in Los Angeles, see the human suffering on the street, right? We have people literally dying on the steps of City Hall. And we also have small businesses and frankly, people's own residence is affected by it, right? Full-on encampments that mean people in wheelchairs can't have to go 4 blocks out of their way because these sidewalks are taken over. And that's just, one example. But everybody has a story of how it's affecting their daily lives. And people are leaving Los Angeles as well as businesses. And our elected leaders keep throwing money at the problem. I believe it's $1.2 billion that's already been, thrown at it, and yet homelessness has gone up 43%. The problem's getting worse, not better. So I think we do need somebody, frankly, with my aggressive background. I think we need somebody who comes in as a prosecutor and isn't going to be settling these cases and isn't going to be just, turning over and just saying, fine, here, let's write a check and try to get rid of the problem with more money, because the problem isn't going to be fixed, this one, with more money. It's a lack of political courage that means we're here where we are. And I'm running for city attorney because I think it's time to bring common sense and integrity back into city government in Los Angeles.
And we're really behind you, and I know after our audience gets to know you, they're going to get behind you. And we interviewed Officer Dion Joseph, who mentioned it's not a food crisis. There's plenty of food. It's not a clothing crisis. There's bags and bags of food. It's not a housing crisis. The problem is a lot of the homeless are what he called double diagnoses, where they're schizophrenic and they're taking methamphetamines and other drugs, and it's creating a big issue. And he believed that we threw the baby out with the bathwater when we closed down during the Reagan era mental hospitals and mental facilities. Could we bring mental hospitals back online, but in a humane way? Is there a way to reform that?
I think that's absolutely a conversation that we should be having. If you talk to folks that are actively on the ground, in the trenches as homeless advocates, right? These are people working in Skid Row, like Officer Dion Joseph. If you talk to those people, yes, they'll be the first ones to tell you, these people are in abject misery. Their problems are so much more complex than an apartment that they're going to get in 5 years is going to ever be able to resolve, right? Some of these people, this isn't going to be the solution. They need much more help. They need many more services. And yet, our elected leaders think it's just going to be all solved with long-term housing that doesn't include services. So I think it's a conversation we absolutely need to have. As a prosecutor, I saw firsthand the absolute wreckage of methamphetamine on our street. It is, there's the involvement of drug cartels and more organized drug trafficking networks that are directly preying and using the individuals on Skid Row and the homeless individuals throughout the city of Los Angeles in furtherance of their drug trafficking, and again, as victims. And that's something we're just not talking about. And it's making the city of Los Angeles much more unsafe than it otherwise would be. I think it's a very real conversation we need to be having of how we make sure that these individuals, that you're right, are dual diagnosed, have mental health illness, that they may be self-medicating with a very prolific and very cheap and very dangerous drug, and to the detriment of everybody, including themselves.
Right. Marina, as our future city attorney, you're going to be protecting us against so many different things. And when I say us, Angelenos, residents of LA, one of the things that is a huge issue personally to me is the way these credit bureaus are reporting credit. If you pay off all your credit cards, you're penalized, and it needs reform. And as city attorney, will you go after the Equifax, the TransUnion, and the other bureau to really reform that for us?
One of the things that I've absolutely enjoyed as being a prosecutor is that we get to focus all of our resources and efforts towards going after the people and companies that we really should be going after. So absolutely, I've heard that complaint a lot. It's for me particularly atrocious when those in power, those corporations in power, really abuse that power. And it's something that I've devoted, the entirety of my government service to holding those people in power and those companies in power accountable. So absolutely.
Yeah, leaving office, Mike Fuhrer did a hell of a job going after Wells Fargo and roping up some money for the city, for them opening up, phantom accounts on our behalf, meaning the consumer's behalf. you mentioned that you were very pleased with that. Look, kind of Monday night quarterbacking it. How would you look back at what Mike Fear could have done more effective? Is there certain things that you wish he did that you think you can do?
I think go after more corporations, quite frankly. I think that that's an area that I would have been very pleased to see him continue. I think that there are a lot of workplace violations and employer abuse that we as prosecutors could really be going after in a much more aggressive way. And finally, I think his position on homelessness and mine is a little different. So certainly that's something I would change.
So, Marina, recently I saw in the news that a San Francisco city center CVS closed down because people are constantly robbing it, not feeling any repercussions. So all the people lost the convenience of that store being in that city center. What is your plan on these, on theft and petty theft as it relates to consumer products in CVS's, 7-Elevens, et cetera?
I read that same article, and in fact, I remember reading, I think it's a Target in the financial district that had, in San Francisco, that had previously reduced its hours, like 9 to 6 or something, and then now closed down entirely because they were losing, I want to say it was like $25,000 every day to shoplifters. And so, this business was like, we can't turn a profit at this point. Like, there's literally no reason that this store should be open anymore. And so they closed it down. And my concern when I read that article was that, is this a harbinger of things to come here in Los Angeles, right? Because, I think all of society runs obviously like under a social contract, right? And the understanding being that there are consequences to your actions. And here, especially in that example, the concern that I have is that there are people who are not following the law, right, and are not seeing any consequences for their actions. And businesses are doing the logical thing and weighing whether this is whether this is any longer a profitable business. And I think the people that are doing the shoplifting, I don't know what's going on in their heads, but I can only imagine that they see this as truly a risk-free endeavor that's going to hurt no one, right? They must think, okay, we're robbing Target, we're robbing CVS, no one's really hurt. But the result is going to hurt people, right? It's going to trickle down into less businesses in these busy areas. It's going to result in less jobs. It's going to result in more people leaving those city centers, and that's a real concern. So I think, again, given my prosecutorial background and frankly, given my personal background as well, I think that we need a reasonable and empathetic law enforcement, but we certainly need a sense of law and order, and crimes like that need to have consequences.
Right. And you mentioned the hours were being cut at that Target or CVS. What's your thoughts on minimum wage? And do you think the minimum wage should be brought up? The argument that is if you bring it up too high, that employers are going to implement kiosks and take away what could be a pass-through job for a college student or high school student. What are your thoughts about the minimum wage?
Sure, and I think here in LA, we enjoy, obviously a higher living wage versus minimum wage. And I think that there's an opportunity for businesses and labor unions to work together to ensure that we're able to have quality jobs, union jobs that are paying a living wage without businesses turning around and cutting those jobs and turning to kiosk and turning to automation. I think that there's an avenue to be able to do that.
That's great to hear. Besides the homeless issues that we've talked about, this city spends millions of our taxpayer money on these frivolous lawsuits. And you always wonder, are these being litigated? Are these being fought for? What are you going to do as city attorney to fight against these frivolous lawsuits that the city's just smashed with every year?
It's a huge issue. It's a huge problem. I'm coming in as a litigator. I'm coming in as somebody who loves to fight at trial. I've had a long legal career now as a litigator, and I don't back down from a tough fight if it's a righteous fight. And I think a lot of these frivolous lawsuits, looking back, I think we should have stood up for them. We should have stood up and fought in court. I think too often city agencies and city offices are run by politicians who find it easier to just write a check versus litigating and actually fighting in court. It's been a long time since the city attorney's office has been run by an attorney first and somebody who is not a politician. And I'm running to be an alternative to that. I'm running to be the prosecutor who's running to, who's running for the seat to be a prosecutor for the city of LA. So as city attorney, I would be fighting a lot more of these lawsuits.
Yeah, it's interesting because we spent millions of dollars fighting, the billboard company Lamar. On the digital billboards they wanted to do around the city, and you wonder, was that misspent? Was the legal strategy misappropriated? But as a street fighter such as yourself, a true litigator, I believe, and I think our audience will believe, that you have the grit to fight these companies tooth and nail and save the city millions of dollars per year.
Yeah, I mean, the speed at which the settlement checks are being written is ridiculous, right? And again, it all translates into more, your LEDWP bill is going to be higher, your trash hauling bill is going to be higher, your streets aren't going to be paved. So it has an effect on the people living in Los Angeles. And more people that I talked to are saying, you know what, we always knew it was expensive to live in Los Angeles. It's just now gotten to be so expensive and the services I'm getting are just not worth it. So I'm gonna move to Studio City, I'm gonna move to Austin, I'm gonna move to Oregon. And it's happening more and more. And those people are taking businesses, they're taking their jobs, they're taking their money, and they're leaving the state and LA. So I want to reverse course on that.
Yeah, it's funny because recently I was parked in a parking space that Tuesday through Friday or Sunday was a legit parking space, but on Monday it wasn't, and it was dark, couldn't see the signs. The ticket was $168, and yeah, I was technically wrong, but wow, have these tickets gone up? These parking tickets, they're killing people.
Yeah.
And it just feels like, is that going to pay for all the frivolous lawsuits that the city attorney didn't keep an eye on?
Yeah, because if you look at our streets, I don't know about you, but where I live, I mean, that street hasn't been paved in forever, and there's holes in it, and half of it's dirt, and so and it makes you wonder, like, wait a second, I'm paying this much money for a parking ticket that in other cities is like $25 or less, and here it's a lot more. And yet that money, where is it going, right? Because clearly that street sign is still covered over and it's not being maintained because it's not visible. My boyfriend just got a parking ticket as well, and he had the same reaction. He's like, the parking sign is like half bent, it's not visible. So technically, sure, if I were to have seen it, I'd be in the wrong, but, and his was, I think, 70 or something. But, that's a lot of money for a lot of Angelenos, right? And yours is even higher. I mean, that's not insignificant, right? And I think for a lot of people, they're making that cost-benefit analysis of it's this, or it's LAWP, or it's that, and you know what? Like, I'm moving to Pasadena, right? And we got to stop that.
Yeah, we do. And it just seems like, even the parking meters, they're so scratched up. You can't even see if your credit card went through and you're good. You have to wait. It's just
until you get a ticket, right?
Right. It's, we just, the city needs some help. And Marina, I think you're the person to do it, and you have a plan. You come from this place that has given you the grit to fight for us. That's what we need, is someone to fight for us.
No, definitely. I mean, I'm an outsider, I'm a fighter, I'm aggressive, and I'm doing it for the right reasons. And I can't wait to be LA's next city attorney.
Well, we look forward to you being that, Marina. Thank you for coming through.
Thank you for having me.